Let's talk about possible penalties or collateral consequences of having a DV conviction. Now, as we've talked about in other videos, domestic violence is actually a sentence enhancer. So when you're looking at criminal charges, initially your underlying criminal charge, so let's say you have an assault charged as a domestic violence offense, that underlying assault is going to carry the penalties regarding how much jail time you could be facing. But domestic violence sentence enhancers in and of themselves carry significant consequences that are in addition to what we would think as the normal underlying criminal charge. For example, you could be ordered to complete domestic violence treatment if you're convicted, and in Colorado, domestic violence treatment is a mandatory component of a probation sentence. You'll also have to deal with a mandatory protection order that's issued, which we discuss in other videos more in depth. Other things to be aware of is a domestic violence conviction will result in the permanent restriction of your gun rights, whether you have a misdemeanor charge or a felony level charge. Speaking of felony levels, in Colorado, domestic violence charges also have a compounding effect, which means if you are on your fourth conviction for domestic violence, or if you're facing a fourth conviction, the district attorney can actually file the sentence enhancer as a separate felony charge. In other words, your fourth conviction for a domestic violence charge in the state of Colorado actually rises it to a felony level. If you were just facing a misdemeanor, you can still be looking at a felony if that is a fourth time that you're coming through the system on a domestic violence charge. There are also non-criminal aspects that you need to be aware of. If you have a domestic violence conviction, it can seriously impact your ability to negotiate for child custody if you're dealing with a child custody battle. It can also have serious impacts on your ability to procure housing. A lot of different grants and loans won't approve people with a domestic violence conviction, even if it's for a misdemeanor level rather than a felony. If you're in the military, you can also face possibly being chaptered out, and a lot of the times we see people who are building up their military career being dishonorably just discharged with a domestic violence conviction. I have not seen anyone in the military be able to keep their position and their job once a domestic violence conviction actually enters against them. In addition, you're looking at the stigma that surrounds domestic violence convictions. Like we've talked about before, even though there may be a misdemeanor minor offense where you're texting someone over and over and over, but you have that domestic violence enhancer, that word violence makes people think that this is an underlying violent act, even though the sentence enhancer can apply to any range of situations where you're charged in a situation that is involving your intimate partner. So domestic violence convictions not only have the criminal components of protection orders, domestic violence treatment, potential jail time, loss of gun rights, but it also has those collateral situations that you have to face in your normal life that you'll have to deal with for the rest of your life, because unfortunately, if you actually have a domestic violence conviction enter against you, those don't go away. They can't be expunged or sealed if it's an actual domestic violence conviction. That's why it's crucially important when you're looking at domestic violence convictions as a possibility, you have to contact an experienced domestic violence attorney to guide you through this process so that you can avoid having that conviction enter permanently on your record at all costs.